Very good day to you, and welcome back to Tall Ship Tuesday. I do thank you very much for taking an interest in my humble account of the American War for Independence. Now, having concluded a successful cruise with the ship Alfred and the sloop of war Providence, quite successfully, and having captured the ship Mellish as well with its many uniforms on board, we do return to our story here. I paid the wages due to the crews of the Alfred and the Providence out of my own purse, and lent the remainder of my money to Congress. That honourable assembly, on February 5th, sent orders from Philadelphia for me to command and conduct a secret expedition that was important in several aspects. Its principal goal was to levy contributions on the island of St. Christopher and on the northern side of Jamaica, then to attack and seize Pensacola. The small squadron designated for this expedition was composed of the Alfred, the Columbus, the Capt, the Hampton, and the Providence. The project was conceived by me, and I had discussed it with Mr. Morris, who later was Minister of Finance. But the jealousy of Mr. Hopkins, the Commander-in-Chief, so compromised this enterprise that it did not occur. Wishing then to render an account of these events to Congress in person, I left Boston for Philadelphia by land. Mr. Hopkins was first suspended, and soon after was dismissed from the service. The season was so advanced that the expedition was abandoned, and Congress resolved to give me command of the frigate Capt while awaiting an occasion to employ me to better advantage. But before I had time to exercise that command, the secret committee of Congress ordered me to embark with my officers and sailors on l'Amphitrite, a French ship destined to leave Portsmouth in New Hampshire for France. And from there we were to proceed to Holland in order to take command of l'Indienne, an extraordinary frigate carrying 36-pound cannon and constructed in Holland for Congress. However, since the commanding officer of l'Amphitrite did not accept the proposition, Congress instructed me to outfit the Ranger, a frigate of 18 guns, with orders to use this small vessel to go take command of l'Indienne and to keep the Ranger as my escort. This last frigate was not yet fully armed, but when General Burgoyne and his army were forced to surrender at Saratoga, it was I who carried this interesting news to Nantes, where I arrived December 2nd, 1777. During my passage, I took 2 prizes from a convoy coming from the Mediterranean, under the protection of the Invincible, of 74 guns. For an entire day in fair weather, I sailed very close to the ship, and I captured the 2 prizes under its cannon. During January of 1778, I journeyed from Nantes to Paris to make arrangement with the American ministers for equipping l'Indienne. But because the news of General Burgoyne's capture had by then determined the French court to recognize the independence of America by a treaty of alliance, and because the English ambassador at the Hague had discovered, by obtaining possession of the papers of an American minister, that l'Indienne belonged to Congress, I acquiesced in the wishes of the American ministers, and it was decided that the most prudent way to preserve this frigate until Congress could take effective measures to employ it in the American service was to cede it to His Most Christian Majesty. This being done, I returned to my little frigate, the Ranger, which was at Nantes. On February 10th, 1778, I received from America some information relative to the stations and force of the warships and frigates that were in America under the command of Lord Howe. I wrote the same day to Mr. Dean, one of the American ministers in Paris, giving him a detailed plan for an expedition to be attempted in America, with a squadron of only 10 ships of the line and some frigates and troops, in order to destroy once and for all time the power of the English in the United States, before reinforcements could be sent from England. France then had it in its Atlantic ports 30 ships of the line, and many frigates equipped and ready for service. Never before had she had, and perhaps never again would she have, a better chance to strike such a decisive blow against the English Navy. If this plan had been adopted without delay, and if a squadron had been detached immediately from Brest to execute it, Great Britain would have had no knowledge of this devastating project until its effects had been consummated in America. Lord Howe would have been surprised and been taken prisoner in the Delaware. Americans could then immediately have manned his fleet, and sending small detachments left and right, they could easily have annihilated the English naval forces on the American coasts before the arrival of Admiral Byron. American enthusiasm would certainly have been so strengthened, and Washington would have been so relieved that he could have taken New York and destroyed or captured all English troops in the United States. At the same time, the French squadron, entering New York Harbor under English colours, could have trapped and captured Lord Byron, and successively all the vessels of his fleet. As one after the other, the ships, dispersed by storms during the crossing, arrived in port. Thus, in one campaign, and with little expense, France would have had an excellent chance to establish American independence and strike a blow that would have brought Great Britain to her knees, forcing her to recognize she was no longer mistress of the ocean. What will posterity think of France's having neglected this inestimable opportunity? Will it not be clear that the original error was only compounded by adopting the plan 3 months after, when it was too late, and by sending the French fleet from Toulon rather than that from Brest at the cost of yet another month? It is useless to describe in detail the unfortunate consequences of this delay. But the general result was a long, bloody, expensive war that eventually involved France, Holland, Spain, and the East Indies. When Mr. Dean informed the court at Versailles of my plan from the expedition to America, he showed such bad faith as to take credit for this project and call himself the author. As a result, he received a portrait of His Majesty on a gold box set with diamonds. In the meantime, I escorted several American vessels leaving Nantes for Quiberon Bay, where Monsieur de la Montpiquet waited with 5 ships of the line, and some frigates under orders waited to protect and escort them until they were west of Cape Finisterre. The departure of Monsieur de la Montpiquet caused no alarm in England, though his destination was unknown. I reached Quiberon Bay on February 13, 1778. I asked Monsieur de la Montpiquet if he would return my salute. That brave officer agreed to do so. Neither he nor I knew that the alliance between France and America had been signed 7 days before at Versailles. This was the first salute received by an American flag from any sovereign power, and gave birth to much dispute in the Parliament of England. I went immediately from Quiberon Bay to Brest. I did not enter the roads, but I dropped anchor at Camaret. There I was detained by contrary winds, until the ambassador of France announced at London the final treaty between His Most Christian Majesty and the United States. Then I entered the roads of Brest and saluted the Capt d'Auvier, who returned the salute and received me with the honours due an admiral on board his flagship La Bretagne. On arriving at Camaret, I communicated to the Capt d'Auvier my plan for an expedition to America. The commander strongly approved it and immediately sent a copy to Monsieur de Sartine. Well then, I suppose that's a very good stopping point for this, and I do thank you very much for coming. Now, I am interested to see, at this point, how the British might respond. I do suspect they may have other ideas about the legitimacy of the American Navy than that reaction from the French. Now, I do thank you once again for taking the time, and I do look forward to seeing you again on another Tall Ship Tuesday. Until then, fare thee well.